Hi everyone, it's Marisa from bumblebeeapothecary.com, and today I'm going to share with you my thoughts based on some of the research that I've done, as well as my training as a certified GAPS coach, my thoughts on the carnivore diet. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's been quite a while since I've done a sit down talk about something type of video, and somebody recently requested this topic, my thoughts on the carnivore diet, and I thought that's a really good topic to talk about. So we're going to jump in. I'm going to share kind of my thoughts on it, my opinions, and then kind of what it's based on and all that good stuff. So before we get started talking about what I think, I just have to add a disclaimer that I am not a medical doctor. This information may or may not apply to you as an individual. This is just my opinion based on research and experience that I have. And then any time that you want to make any changes for yourself, always run everything by your trusted medical professional first. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump in. So what is the carnivore diet? So my understanding of the carnivore diet is that it is a way of eating that only uses animal products. So if it came from an animal directly, then it's in the carnivore diet. That's my understanding. Now I'm aware that there can be different variations and versions slightly, but I think that that's a pretty good working definition. So my understanding is that it includes meat, obviously. It's going to include things like fat, dairy products, eggs, things like honey, since that comes from bees. And as far as I am aware, that's pretty much the extent of it, unless I remember something else. But yeah, so I guess it's really the opposite of the vegan diet, I guess, is another way to think about it. So carnivore has become popular lately for a variety of reasons. Traditionally, there have been different cultures around the world who ate more or less heavier on the animal products. Dr. Weston A. Price did a lot of studies on this when he traveled around and documented what different traditional cultures and tribes were eating and the health of those different people depending on what they were eating and kind of how it related. It's very, very fascinating. But he did find that while there were different variations as far as how much or how little animal products were in different people's diets versus plant products in their diets, he never found anyone that was exclusively plant-based, which is very interesting. Everybody that he studied contained some animal products of some type. So I just think that's pretty interesting. So there were carnivore tribes that he studied, and then there were some with mostly animal products and a little bit of plants, or more plants and less animal products. They were all different kinds of varieties, and of course they lived in different parts of the world and had access to different types of foods. And so reading his book Nutrition and Physical Degeneration is very fascinating. So that's kind of a background from the past. And then more recently, carnivore diets have become more popular while people are trying to figure out ways to address different chronic health issues and be as healthy as they can be. Sometimes people stumble upon the carnivore diet or discover it different ways and end up trying it, and it ends up being very helpful for them. So I have some thoughts on why this could be. So Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, the creator of the GAPS diet, which you are probably familiar with if you've been on my channel for any length of time, talks about how foods can be divided into two categories, animal foods and plant foods. And she talks about how animal foods are builders. They provide those nutrients to repair the body, to rebuild the body, to accomplish those types of things. Plant foods, on the other hand, are cleansers, says Dr. Natasha. So animal foods are builders, plant foods are cleansers. They provide nutrients that help the body detox and cleanse. Now, Dr. Natasha says that both are important, but she also says that people can live on exclusively animal products, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second, but she says people cannot live long-term on exclusively plant products. And I know that that's a bit controversial today, but that's what she says. She says that is the case because you can't cleanse forever. Pretty soon your body is going to turn in on itself when it runs out of building materials and start using what's there to try to stay alive, and that's not a good situation. So she says that the modern vegan diet is actually a fast. Traditionally, there were different cultures throughout the world who would do a temporary vegan diet as a fast for a health reason or a religious reason, and that it was not meant to be a long-term way of eating. It was a short-term fast that they did for different reasons. But yeah, it was not a long-term way of eating, and they realized that it could not be because it wasn't sustainable. So I found that very interesting when I learned that from her. Dr. Natasha has a version of the GAPS diet that she more recently developed based on clinical experience and helping clients, called the no plant GAPS diet. So that is a type of a carnivore diet that I am most familiar with, and that is basically a version of the GAPS diet that really focuses on just those building animal foods, and it can be very, very helpful for people who have severe digestive situations. So things like ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, babies and children with FPIES, if you're familiar with that. It's where they're basically allergic to every protein. The no plant GAPS diet has been used by Dr. Natasha and GAPS practitioners and coaches with great success for these different conditions. So that is the type of carnivore that I'm the most familiar with. And from my understanding, from my training, is that no plant GAPS or related versions of carnivore work so well because when the body is in dire need of just building material, that's what serves it best, is meat, fat, meat stock, broth, dairy products, especially cultured dairy on GAPS, egg yolks, things like that. The building, nourishing foods that give the body the nutrients and the tools and the building blocks to be able to repair and make progress towards wellness. So I think, like I was mentioning before, one of the reasons why the carnivore diet has become so popular lately is that there's been a big rise of chronic illness and not a lot of answers in a lot of other places. And people try the carnivore diet and they start feeling better and they start experiencing relief from their symptoms and different things like that. And I think that must be why it is because in those kind of situations, the body really just needs building materials and it doesn't need cleansing materials. So plant foods, Dr. Natasha describes, are much harder to digest than animal foods. Animal foods are much easier to digest, so it's less work for the body. It's providing the nutrients that it needs, versus the plant foods are harder to digest and they're cleansing, which, if that's not what the body needs right now, doesn't help. So I'm not saying I'm necessarily a carnivore diet advocate, like that's the way to go, everybody needs to do this. No, I'm not saying that at all. And those of you who have been with me for a while will know that's not what I think either. I think that it just depends. It depends on what situation the person is in. There can be times where maybe for a temporary time or maybe for a while that a person would benefit from avoiding plant foods and focusing only on animal foods. And that could be very helpful for overcoming something. I think that long term, when the person is healthy and can digest plants, I absolutely think that those should be included because they do have benefits of their own. And cleansing is important when the body is ready for it too. I wanted to also kind of talk about my thoughts about the more mainstream carnivore diet, where people are eating things like steaks and ground meat and, different cuts of meat, not necessarily the GAPS, the no plant GAPS version. And I have heard good things about it. I have heard people have good success with recovering and experiencing relief from symptoms and different things like that, eating that way. So I think there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. I personally myself would go ahead and do the GAPS protocol if I was in a position where no plant GAPS was going to be right for me or carnivore was going to be right for me. I would go ahead and do that way. because incorporating those things like the meat stock, so all the gelatin rich meat stock, and then the egg yolks and the cultured dairy and all those kinds of things just have so many wonderful benefits that would be my preference, is to go ahead and do that way. But I have heard great things about the more mainstream carnivore diet as well, and it sounds like it has worked really well for people and been very helpful for some people. So yeah, those are my thoughts on it. That's kind of what I know based on my experience and training as a certified GAPS coach, and what I've learned from Dr. Natasha, and then just also researching and listening to other people. I know that there's a variety of other protocols out there that also use versions of the carnivore diet, like for example the root cause protocol is one. Mary Ruddick will oftentimes have her clients do different versions of a carnivore type diet. So there's a lot of different versions, variations out there. All in all, I think it's a good thing, and just listening to the body and meeting it where it's at and what its needs are at any given time, I think is really important. And sometimes those needs could be a purely animal-based diet. For anybody who is considering the more mainstream carnivore type way of eating, some thoughts that I would have for myself if I were considering that would be to make sure that you're getting a wide variety of the different cuts of meat, so that you're getting those gelatinous, easier to digest meats. Like, I wouldn't eat just steak all the time, for example. I would mix it up with ground meats and stews and things like that that would have those other cuts of meat, so that you're getting a wide variety. And then, like I said, I would make sure to include things like the egg yolks and high quality grass-fed dairy and things like that, and to make sure to keep a good variety like that. If I was going to do it, those are the things that I would keep in mind. Another thing that I've heard is very important on carnivore is to keep your electrolytes balanced. So having a very high quality mineral salt or some type of mineral that is very wide and contains everything that you need would be very, very important to have on hand as well. As far as anything else that would be important, I'm not sure, so I'm not saying that's an exhaustive list. Those are just the things that I know from talking to other people, listening to people, research that I've done, is getting the variety, making sure the minerals are there and electrolytes. Those are the things that I'm aware of. But yeah, definitely do your own research. Make sure that you're well informed before you do anything dietary wise. It's always very important. And of course, I can't recommend this book enough. Dr. Natasha's newest GAPS book, Gut and Physiology Syndrome. This is her newest GAPS book, where she does have the versions of no plant GAPS, of course full GAPS and intro. There's more plant GAPS because sometimes that's important for people. So all these different, and a GAPS liquid fast also is in here. So these different versions that can be really helpful for different specific situations. So I'll have this book linked down below if you're interested in grabbing your own copy. I highly recommend it. And then, like I mentioned, I am a certified GAPS coach. I do work with clients. I have a coaching package. I have some smaller things like meal plans and smaller help programs that I offer. So check out that description box for links to all those things if you're interested in any of that. But I hope that you found this interesting and helpful, and I would love to know your thoughts. Are you familiar with the carnivore diet at all? What are your thoughts on it? Have you tried it? What was your experience? Just let me know in the comments what you think. Be sure also to check out that description box for links to things like free ebooks, other things that I've made for you guys. And if you're new to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. I get out new videos every week on nourishing recipes and natural living. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.